Hello, I'm Fernando Guerra, Professor of Political Science and Chicano Studies at Loyola Marymount University. I'm also the Director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles. In addition, I am the host for the Urban Lecture Series, the program you are about to view. Here at Loyola Marymount University, we take pride in having our students engaged in the civic dialogue of Los Angeles. We send our students out to the community, but in addition, through this program, we bring the community to Loyola Marymount University. We hope you are informed by today's program. And for more information about Loyola Marymount University, the Center for the Study of Los Angeles, and the Urban Lecture Series, please check out our website at lmu.edu/CSLA.
Welcome to the Urban Lecture Series at Loyola Marymount University, sponsored by the Levy Center for the Study of Los Angeles. We are particularly proud that it's today sponsored by Sempra and the gas company, but it's also sponsored by several academic departments here at Loyola Marymount University. Urban Studies, Chicano Studies, Economics, American Cultures, and of course political science. So thank you to all our sponsors. Today we're going to be talking about the greening of LA, and we have several panelists from a variety of different aspects of Los Angeles and approaching the greening of LA in different ways. Let me introduce them to you very briefly. First, right next to me is Irma Muñoz, who is president of Mujeres de la Tierra. Before starting this organization, she worked in a position with San Diego State University's Housing Office, and she was chief of staff to a senior ranking state legislator, has also worked in public affairs, community affairs, and I can go on and on about her many accomplishments, but that would take the whole session, so I'm just going to also let her talk a little bit about herself. But one thing I always like to point out is where they went to university. She got her Bachelor of Arts at UC San Diego and her Juris Doctorate from Thomas Jefferson School of Law. Next to her is Adan Ortega, who's the managing partner of Water Conservation Partners. Before working with this company, and we'll ask him what the heck that company is, he worked for Rose and Kindle. It's a very small, not very successful public affairs firm. And that's why he had to go and take a different job. Before that, he worked for the Metropolitan Water District as assistant, and he was also assistant general manager for the West and Central Basin Municipal Water Districts. These are some very large water districts that deliver water throughout Southern California. He is a graduate of Whittier College here in Los Angeles County. Next to Adan is Andy Lipkis. He is founder and president of TreePeople. He began planting trees as a young man, and he founded TreePeople as president since 1973. He's been honored with all kinds of awards, including the National Philanthropic Day and a variety of different other environmental groups. His latest program is TREES, T-R-E-E-S, which stands for Trans-Agency Resources for Environmental and Economic Sustainability. TreePeople is a Los Angeles-based nonprofit dedicated to helping nature heal our cities. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about what that organization is. Next to him, and don't tell Councilman Rosendahl and Councilman Alarcon, who were here the last couple of weeks, and Councilman Janice Hahn, who's going to be here next week, but this is my favorite council member.
Say that to all of us. It's on tape.
So this is Jan Perry, who's a council member in District Number 9. This is her third term. She represents a large part of downtown, and very interesting to us is that she's also the head of a committee that oversees the Department of Water and Power, and I think the harbor. And there's been a little bit of talk about the Department of Water and Power, so we'll talk a little bit about that. The Department of Water and Power is the largest municipal utility in the United States. And we're going to talk extensively about that. She earned her bachelor's degree from USC School of Journalism, and she also received a master's degree from USC in Public Administration. Okay, so let's get started. And I'm going to start with you, Irma, and talk and tell us a little bit about your organization, why you started it, and what are you guys up to right now?
Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to thank the community of Loyola Marymount for inviting Mujeres de la Tierra. I'm the founder and president of Mujeres de la Tierra, and interestingly, I was inspired to start my organization when I was working for Andy Lipkis at TreePeople. So there's a lot of connections to the work that we do. The reason I started the organization is because I believe that there wasn't a platform, particularly for Latinos, to take leadership roles in environmental issues. And I came to that conclusion when NRDC published a report stating that Latino children were the children that were afflicted mostly with health issues because of environmental woes. And I was really concerned because all of the articles that I read, it's a great study, both in English and in Spanish, but not one Latino researcher, biologist, environmentalist was interviewed, not a family, and it really bothered me. And I happened to know the reporter, and I called the reporter, and the reporter basically said, well, don't you know that Latinos don't care about the environment? That if you turn on KMEX, the Spanish language news media or radio, that there's no coverage. And so I thought, what do you mean? And so it was at that moment that I realized that instead of being complacent and angry and upset, that I should start my own organization to create a platform for women and children to take ownership and leadership of issues that are important to them in their neighborhood.
NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is one of the preeminent environmental groups and those that study the environment. So that's who you were talking about.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Adan, Latinos are not involved in the environment or water issues. So why have you been involved?
Well, I got involved many years ago when I was working with the West and Central Basin Municipal Water District. We were building the West Basin Water Recycling Plant, which is just a few miles down. At the time, it was the largest water recycling facility in the United States. Currently, it provides recycled water to most of the major refineries right here in the South Bay. And it got me on the board of Hilda Bay, where I was a member of the board for about 12 years. And it dawned on me, working at Hilda Bay and then working for the water supply agencies, that there is a disconnection between the economics of water. And when it comes to the economics of water, we separate.
I'm sorry, pull the mic a little bit closer.
We basically separate the cost of bringing water to you from the cost of discharging that water and treating it after. And I know Andy has done some incredible analysis of where the opportunities are to actually get some economies of scale. In recent years, what's happened is that, as you've all read, we have a water scarcity. The Department of Water Resources has evaluated that in
The state agency.
the Department of Water Resources of the state of California, in their 5-year water report, have estimated that just in the coastal plain of Southern California, from Los Angeles all the way down to San Diego, actually from Ventura down to San Diego, we waste about 1 million acre-feet of water a year. Let me give you the magnitude.
What's an acre-foot?
An acre-foot is enough to provide your average family for 2 years. So it's 2 families per acre-foot per year. Our total demands are 4 million acre-feet in the coastal plain. We meet those demands through a variety of sources, including local groundwater, water recycling, and water reclamation and conservation. But 2 million acre-feet is imported from other parts of the Southwest and from Northern California. We use over half of that water, of the total amount, for outdoor irrigation, and we waste half of it. That's 1 million acre-feet of water. In the state of California, urban areas waste about 3 million acre-feet, and the report identifies about 600,000 acre-feet of additional water use efficiency that we could get out of agriculture. So before we talk about taking more water from other sources, I think you're going to have a variety of us arguing that we need to maximize the efficiency of what we're using. And my company is trying to do that through market motivators rather than through public incentives, which we can get into later.
But don't we Angelinos use less water than ever before per person?
Well, yes. I mean, if you look at the fact that we were using 210 gallons per person per day, on average, this is back in the early 1990s, and after the conservation programs that DWP and MWD did, we've brought that down to an average of about 150, 170, depending on where you live. But let me give you an example of where we're deficient. You compare us against Australia. They use roughly about 80 gallons per person per day. And if we were to reduce our waste outdoors, for example, in my home, when I was at the Metropolitan Water District, we started the California Friendly campaign and the BeWaterWise.com. I figured I had to put my money where my mouth was. We landscaped our whole property. We live on a half-acre lot in Orange County. Our total consumption in our home is 90 gallons, 30 gallons per person per day. Just by redoing our outdoor irrigation and capturing stormwater and just doing some basic things that are really no sacrifice. So there you have it.
Yeah. Andy, tree people, kind of self-descriptive. Does that mean you hang out in trees, or what do you do?
Yes, the challenge with our name is that people think that trees are decorations, and where they're actually critical acupuncture needles for healing the environmental pain and injustice of our city. Trees are actually one of the prime means of water supply on the planet, both recharging the clouds, but capturing rain, cleaning it, preventing floods, getting it back in the aquifer. And so I'll challenge you on the self-evident, because whenever people learn what we're really up to, they go, whoa, you got to change your name. I said, no, we're failing at our job of educating people about who people are and what trees are. So we'll get into that. And maybe I'll just pick up the path that you laid and follow Adan and Irma. Our work, I began the work when I was 15 years old, and I still haven't graduated college. You might consider me a dropout, but I promised my parents I'll get a degree someday.
Hey, Loyola Marymount, as long as you pay our tuition, I think I can make it.
I'll find a donor. I began because of the pain of living. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles, in fact, about 5 miles east of here in the western part of South Los Angeles. And we had smog. We had really bad smog, worse than it is now, and it hurt to breathe. And it hurt a lot to breathe. It was before we had air pollution laws. And those of us young people up here remember who grew up here. It actually, I was blessed not to have lung disease, but still I had to come home after school, turn on the kettle and breathe steam, because we were made to play out of this stuff. And I was really lucky. My parents sent me out of town every summer to go play up into the mountains. And I learned that smog was killing the trees that were up there, 2 hours away from here. Those trees were filtering the smog out of the air, making it livable for us, but in the process, they were breathing in the smog, they were dying in service to us. And we kids were told that if nothing was done, and nothing was being done, that the forests that surround LA would be dead by the year 2000. This was 1970. And we were told that it was up to us kids if the forests were going to be saved, because the adults weren't doing it. So back then, the year of the first Earth Day, which we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of next week, we picked up shovels and started planting smog-resistant trees. There was something so powerful about literally making a change in the landscape and making a change and making a difference that caused me to keep doing this work. And I'm speaking to you now about that very point as we begin to leverage how powerful you are. So there's this misconception out there that the power is in the hands of government and elected officials, and I'm sure Councilwoman Perry is going to validate this. It's not there. It was the kids of LA who led Los Angeles into recycling. It was the kids who took the fact that people wouldn't change lifestyles, that people wouldn't recycle. And LA believed, every official in Los Angeles believed that only 10% of the people in the city would recycle because they didn't speak English, because for all kinds of reasons why people believed it wouldn't happen. But when we, TreePeople working in partnership with the city of LA, took an education program to the kids and said, prove them wrong. Teach your families what to do. In 2 years, the kids of LA changed the behavior of their families, and when the city program rolled out, 90% of the people in Los Angeles recycled, like that. You turned them on a dime, and you weren't born yet. The numbers that Adan talked about, the fact that yes, we're using less water today in LA than we did 20, 30 years ago, again, was lifestyle change, motivated supported by the city, by DWP and MWD, but enacted by people who were willing to change lifestyle. So here we are today with huge issues. Los Angeles is one of the largest sources of climate change on the planet. Bringing water to LA, delivering all that water that Adan was talking about, is the largest single use of electricity in the state of California. Think about that. We're the 6th largest economy on the planet. The largest single use of electricity in the entire state is to pump water to our city. Moving water around the state consumes about 20% of the electricity overall. But bringing water here is crazy. It's a climate change experience when, as Adan described, it doesn't have to be. We can literally transform this city by transforming every piece of land, from this campus to our homes, to our apartments, to places where people live, learn, work, play. TreePeople has been demonstrating that. That's what Trans-Agency Resources for Environmental and Economic Sustainability is about. We've proved it's technically and economically feasible. First at a home in Jan's district, where that was a home that used 200-something gallons per person per day. Irma was there. We put in a cistern to capture the rain. We took out most of the lawn, put in a much more beautiful landscape, put in fruit trees that fed the people, put in trees that shaded the home and saved energy, put in trees that shaded the people and started preventing some of the skin cancer that is rife in our community. Literally a retrofit. And then when we dumped 5,000 gallons of water on the home, not a drop left, because all the water was captured. Now, I'll finish with this, just in terms of the opportunity we have before us. All of you remember last year, February 23rd, you should remember it's a date in history. Drawing blanks. It was the day Mayor Villaraigosa declared a stage 3 drought emergency in Los Angeles. Stage 3 drought emergency, never declared before. It happened to rain that day. And we have short-term memory loss as a community. It rained that day, but that was the day that a cistern that we built at TreePeople's headquarters filled. It finished filling its 217,000 gallons. That gave us enough water to be off the grid for the entire year. So while LA was drying up, we had abundant water purely because we captured the rainfall that had already fallen that year. And that was, last year was one of the lowest rainfall years in LA's history. We receive enough water to meet most of our needs.
So we receive enough water naturally for 4 million people in the city of LA.
If we were to capture it and use it right, retrofitting our homes so they're healthier, safer. The problem is, when we throw that water away, what motivated Adan, LA County spends $500 million a year to help us throw away that water. And it costs now in excess of $1 billion a year to bring in fresh water. In that gap.
But explain what you mean by that the LA County spends $500 million to throw away the water.
So, Los Angeles County Flood Control Department, those are the people whose job it is to get rid of rainfall, to make it safe so we don't drown in our yards and on our streets. We built the city wrong, but their principle was keep water and people apart to keep it safe. We take the rainfall, we throw it away, we pollute it, which is why we need Heal the Bay. Throw that water away. But we spend collectively $500 million. On the flip side, we spend $1 billion just in the city of LA to bring in fresh water. That's where all that energy is used. And what I'm saying is those two agencies barely communicate. They didn't communicate until we went trans-agency on them and got them talking. But why I'm stressing this is back to the purpose of tonight about environmental and social justice. If we're hemorrhaging $1 billion a year in water, those could be jobs. Those could be really great jobs, especially for urban youth, managing LA as a living watershed instead of as a drain. And that's what
the typical perception is, though, that it rains only a couple of days, and that it's difficult to capture that water. Where would you store that water then to be able to use it?
The notion of a cistern is what I talked about. TreePeople headquarters, which is a park, 217,000 gallons. We've designed a cistern, not brilliant. I mean, other people have them. They're coming out of Australia. But we've made one that can be manufactured locally that can hold 20,000 gallons on a house. And we could retrofit this city with those and be one of the huge new sources of sustainable, resilient water and jobs and a healthy economy.
It sounds pretty commonsensical, Adan. Why isn't it done?
Well, economics. As I stated earlier, and as Andy reiterated, the economics are not blended between the act of bringing water to your tap and the act of treating that water once it leaves your tap. So when you are not leveraging those economics, you're letting go of a lot of opportunities. I think the bottom line here is that when we use water and when we treat water, we don't see the real cost of that treatment. So consumers at a basic level are not motivated or willing to pay. I think the other aspect is that when we ask for private investment to be done for these efficiency measures, that private investment has to be motivated by something. Let me give you an example. Chevron, they've been using thousands of acre feet of water over the last decade, recycled water. That means that they don't touch the groundwater rights that they have underneath the ground, right? They're not using imported water, thereby saving energy of having to bring that water over. Yet there's no system, for example, for allowing them to use whatever groundwater right they have here in this area somewhere else during certain circumstances that we could perhaps prescribe. So if we don't motivate those that are already doing the right thing by allowing them to realize the full value of all their assets, then it's really tough to make the argument based on an incentive which isn't even real. Let me give you another example. When a water agency does an incentive for a water conservation device, they basically blend the price that it costs to bring water from the Colorado River in Northern California with the lower cost of taking water under the ground. So they'll only justify $154 to $250 per acre foot on a device. Well, the city of LA is telling developers that want to annex into the city today, well, bring your own water. So the developer goes into the market, and how much does that water cost? $1,000 an acre foot if you can get it. So there's this disconnect, there's this lack of connection between the real world, where we're asking the private sector to live, and then the government world, which is based on a whole different set of economics. And at some point, if we're going to have a green LA, we're going to have to blend those economics. So that, regretfully, we're going to have to ask people to pay more money to sustain their municipal system so that it can be reflected in what we're asking the private sector to do.
We asked Council Member Jan Perry to be here because she is the chair of the Energy and Environment Committee in Los Angeles. But before we're going to basically talk about that responsibility that she has, but I want to point out to the students that she is multifaceted. She does all kinds of different things, and I would, and many people, talk about her being one of the 3, 4, 5 most important people in the whole redevelopment of Los Angeles. She's one of the main architects of what we see now that has occurred in the renewed downtown that we have. It's her district, and she's been a champion for redeveloping Los Angeles along those lines. So I just don't want you students to think that all she does is this what we're going to talk about. She does all kinds of different things for the city of Los Angeles. I meant to actually have the DWP water. I'm sorry that we have. Yeah, see, he refused the water.
Out of the tap.
Out of the tap, and it's probably just as safe. And it cost us, for what we cost for this bottle, okay, we could have had, no bottle, we could have had probably this whole table gallons of water from DWP. It's just in terms of what Adan was talking about. You're in charge of the city's Department of Water and Power, or are you?
Yeah, that's the Department of Water and Power falls under the auspices of my committee. Harbor doesn't. Harbor is under Commerce, but right now we're going through a very serious reform movement to change the way the department is governed and the way the department administers its affairs. And it is because we're trying to take people into the future on the issue of renewable energy and alternative energy and power sources. But we're in the midst of a recession, and we're trying to do it in a way that moves people forward but doesn't break their backs. And I'm glad Andy brought up the cistern project at 54th and Western, because one of the best ways to be able to help people step into the future is to show them tangible examples of adjustments that they can make in their lives that are achievable and affordable and will actually translate into savings for them down the road in a way that is not intimidating but very user-friendly. And that's just one example. There are a number of examples, and yeah, you're right, I've done a lot of work downtown, but I've also done an enormous amount of work in South Los Angeles, and I felt that it was very important to change the way that people perceive South Los Angeles and the way that I went about rebuilding it. And so I have a number of soccer fields made out of recycled tennis shoes. We have a brand new Silver LEED certified City Hall at 43rd and Central. I've worked a lot on obesity issues, and we have 2 wetlands. One is already built, and that is an acre wetland, and then I'm working on a 10-acre wetland right now. The first one that is already built is at Slauson and Compton inside of a nature park called the Augustus Hawkins Nature Park. The second one is at 54th and Avalon. The first one was an old pipe yard for the Department of Water and Power, oddly enough. The second one was an old MTA bus yard where they repaired buses, and in both cases they were a blight upon the community, and I felt that it was really important to take advantage of some interesting issues that were going on in South LA. Years ago, when I was a staff person, I always went to block club meetings at about 76 in San Pedro. I'd come out of the meeting at night about 8:30, 9 o'clock. It was always foggy and very moist, and then I'd see these really weird birds landing and looking for something to eat. And I realized, because I've never seen these kinds of birds in the city, especially that far south, well, they were egrets. And I realized that if egrets could come as far south or north, depending on where they were coming from, to 76 in San Pedro, that there was something very interesting going on here, and that we ought to, do something with that. The historic riverbed flowed through this area. The topography was undulating and rather close to the ocean in some ways. And even though it was South Los Angeles, there was no reason in the world why people in South Los Angeles couldn't have the same types of opportunities as people who, actually the wetlands out here or in Orange County. And so I've set about creating this green agenda for South LA, and so far it's been going pretty well.
Can I just say that she got the idea more than 12 years ago. It takes a long time to manifest a physical change. Jan became a citizen forester, rolled up her sleeves, and I mean, this wasn't just policy, this was hard work. And I'm saying it because of the lessons that, again, if anyone's equipped to change LA, it's you guys, because it's going to take time, and you can do it.
I did. He's right. I had forgotten that. I sat on the front porch of a lady who was in a block club in Vermont Square over by 47th and Normandy, and we sat on the steps, and I took a citizen forester class from the TreePeople, and and even before that in the Miracle Mile, I planted trees. I planted trees in a number of locations and held the pile driver, the whole thing. But he's right. It actually goes back that long that I began to grasp the significance of taking up on these tasks of just transforming incrementally spaces that are within your control and converting them to something that was healthier and green.
But what are the obstacles that it takes so long? Because, I mean, most of the students here are going to be a little bit impatient about waiting 10 to 12 years.
Well, money.
For instance, go ahead.
It's money. When you work in the government, if you don't have a private sector source, and you can talk about this too, really. It took, for example, the City Hall, this Silver LEED certified building, took us 5 years from start to finish.
Let them know what LEED certified is.
It's an environmental certification. There's what is it?
Leadership in environmental and
something in design.
energy.
In design. But you have, it's like the Olympics of ecological or environmental design. Silver's pretty good. The top level is platinum, obviously. But
And that means that if you get those awards, that how you built the building
Right.
was environmentally sustainable, and then the building, how it functions
Right.
is environmentally
right,
sustainable.
we have we have recycled glasscrete on the floors. All the furniture is made out of recycled materials, as is the carpeting. We have a water feature on site to catch the urban runoff. We also have the first rooftop garden in a municipal building in the city of Los Angeles. And for South LA, that not only does that provide additional green space at another level, it enables people to come out at night and still be outside and to be in a very secure space. We have a porous fence around the whole project. It's heavily landscaped with drought-tolerant plants, and it's become a community healthy eating, healthy living center already.
I mean, LA is very liberal, Hollywood types. Look out there and look how these students are dressed. There's a consensus that we ought to do what is right for the environment. And our city council, there's 15 of you. I think there's one Republican, one who refuses to agree he's a Republican, and then 13 Democrats. Most of them extremely liberal. There's a consensus. There's a vast majority of you. Why can't we get this done?
I'll tell you that a big part of it is what you're doing here. There's a lack of environmental literacy. One is that people think that by saying you're green, and no one knows the distinction. And so we need to hold people accountable.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our students say they're Catholic, but they're not really. So we understand that analogy.
But that's one. I mean, again, you who are studying this stuff need to hold people accountable, so they can't just say they're green and then votes that actually aren't. Two, the funding is all wired wrong. Again, why this notion of trans-agency, bringing agencies together. When I talked about water supply, DWP spending roughly $1 billion to bring in water, flood control spending $500 million. There's all these agencies in Los Angeles that are managing the ecosystem. We are a living ecosystem, but the city was built without knowing it. It was structured without knowing it. And so there is nobody, literally nobody in the city, nobody in the county, nobody in the state, nobody at the federal government who manages the land as an ecosystem. So instead, we have bureaucracies. And not only do we have water supply, get rid of water, but we also have sanitation. City of Los Angeles spends over $100 million a year to pick up and haul green waste, biomass, tree leaves. So in a forest, in a living watershed, those trees capture the the leaves that come out of trees. When they fall to the ground, they break down to what? Yes, mulch. What else? Compost. Really great soil. And who lives in that? Worms, mushrooms, all kinds of critters. Those guys.
I'm the only one allowed here to give exams.
Oh, okay, no, not exam, but I'm connecting the dots in a way that nobody's asking us to connect the dots, and it's putting us at risk because we're not. And so it's really simple. The trees and all that stuff underneath. If you were to imagine a huge California native oak tree, 100 feet in diameter, what's under it, all those leaves, mulch, worms, critters, that space runs 5 feet deep under any oak tree. That holds 57,000 gallons of water in a flash flood. You take, and the tree manages it, cleans it.
I mean, it's not possible to get that in the city of LA.
But we can use biomimicry to start replacing those functions. Biomimicry, using technology.
That's going to be on the exam.
Okay, so let me explain. Using technology, good engineering, good sense to use nature and its services and mimic it. So yes, we can't plant enough trees, but we can enable trees to be connected back to the watershed, which cities like Santa Monica and even LA is starting to do, so the tree roots can get the water and clean it. And then build technologies that instead of completely obliterating nature, and I'm going to make a risky statement now, like desal, we have the ability to capture the water here, clean it, do just what the trees did, and prevent floods, and protect us from climate change, and clean up the water going to the bay. That's what trees do. That's what the technology could do. But it doesn't happen because we have all these agencies. Once you take the, let me just finish that thought. That tree captures 50,000 gallons of water, right? Puts it back in the aquifer. It's our water supply. Take the tree out. take that one tree away, you send a flood of 57,000 gallons downstream. Someone's going to get hurt. Somebody's paying. But once that tree's gone, what do we replace it with?
Concrete, a parking lot.
Infrastructure, bureaucracy.
Oh, okay. Let me tell you.
Different agencies, flood control, water supply, who never communicate again. Our job is to hold government accountable in partnership with them to reconnect the dots so they stop wasting the chance for us to have jobs.
You are watching the Urban Lecture Series at Loyola Marymount University, sponsored by the Lipkis Center for the Study of Los Angeles and Sempra Energy, also known as the gas company here in Los Angeles. We have with us today Council Member Jan Perry and the Lipkis from the TreePeople, Irma Muñoz, and also Adan Ortega. Irma, when you hear about this, how do we get communities to support? Because for the students right here, in terms of the panelists, we have one elected policymaker government official, and that's Councilwoman Jan Perry. We have Adan, who's now in the private sector trying to do environmental things, but also previously he was, I take this in the right way, a bureaucrat. He ran water systems. And then we have with Andy and Irma, people, nonprofit, trying to do it from the ground up to force, and you've heard the passion that Andy has about forcing government and bureaucracies to do the right thing for the city. What is the process that you are currently utilizing to try to get government to be responsive? And what level of frustration do you have, or have you been successful? What's been going on with your organization?
Well, there is a lot of frustration, and I want to share with folks something that's happening right now, and it's been happening, this struggle for the last 5 years, and that's in urban Los Angeles, in the Baldwin Hills area where I live, and Andy grew up. There are, for the last 80 years, there's about 1,000 oil wells, with about a third of them being live and inactive, another third inactive, and the other third, we're not sure what's happening with theirs. About 3 years ago, there was some poisonous odors in the evening, early morning, that were carried through Santa Ana winds to Culver Crest, a set of neighborhoods in the Culver City area, that they had to evacuate a number of families for purposes of health reasons. Because if you stood in front of this oil well where these gases were coming out, you would experience brain damage in 15 minutes. So needless to say, that prompted for the first time ever accountability of those oil wells in those 80 years. And I always asked the question, I had 2 neighbors, that sparked me. Community health is what sparked me into really getting involved. There are 2 women neighbors, one who lived in front of me, one to the side, who both were diagnosed of cancer at the age of 58 and both died before they turned 60. And I wanted to know, is there a relationship between not only those cancers, but all the children in my neighborhood who have asthma and what's going on with those oil wells? And finally, about 8 years later, when these gases were emitted, the county started having hearings. And the frustrating part is because I believe that the power of people, I believe in the power of the individual, the power of one, that if you organize and you work with communities and you educate them and you hold your electeds accountable, very political in that sense, and I believe that works. In this case, it didn't work. And we had meetings after meetings, community focus meetings, studies and whatnot.
And what were you trying to accomplish? At least just a study, or to actually shut the oil wells down, or what was the objective?
They wanted to drill another 1,000 new oil wells there, and we wanted there to stop the oil drilling. And we wanted them to study what was the impact of those oil wells before they move forward. The Board of Supervisors voted 5-0 for them to continue. And that was after 2 years, and it was very frustrating. Then we received another board supervisor in the area, Margaret Lee Thomas, who said, wait a second, we moved too quickly, and gave us some hope. And the reason I think there was a 5-0 vote is economics. That oil company pays a lot of money that goes into the county coffers. And the reality is that they need that money. And even though there are a lot of health issues, a lot of property damage, because on my side of the hill, there's a lot of rattling taking place because when they pull oil out, they inject it with a water solution. So you can imagine soil shifting. As a matter of fact, if you've lived in LA, most of us here for a while, there was a reservoir where Kenneth Hahn Park currently exists, and it burst and created a lot of lies and property damage. And scientists and researchers claim the reason that that water reservoir burst is because of the oil wells.
Yeah, it was a little dam up there, right?
Exactly. So, you know, it
Well,
was kind of,
compared to Hoover, I guess it's relative.
yeah. So, you know, but I do believe in community organizing. That's what we do with our families and children. We work with people who've been overlooked from the process, who never get invited to community meetings, who never get a flyer, who never know what's going on. So those are the folks who really need to start engaging and getting involved. Because it's not, and we started that with the Los Angeles River. When the city of Los Angeles was putting together the master plan, as a matter of fact, Adan worked on it. The people that lived near and around the river were not being asked what they wanted to be developed in the Los Angeles River. So there are a number of organizations, including my own, that we would go door to door, and I did the outreach over in the Conoco Park, which is the beginning of the river. It was very interesting there. The folks there, mostly immigrants, felt that they didn't have a right to an opinion. It didn't matter what they said, no one was going to listen, because all the development that takes place up in that area is at their expense. And so they said, why are you even asking us? Who cares what we have to say? And so it's really inspiring people that they can make a difference and they can organize, and it only takes one person to organize those folks. Because on the other hand, we've had a lot of successes, and those successes have usually come with one person saying we can and we will.
Adan, you represent the Metropolitan Water District. Before that, the Central and West Basin Water District, and they want to build. Now, you're a little bit more sensitive because you were external relations, et cetera. You weren't the engineer who see this as very technical. You want to deliver water from point A to point B. You want to preserve water. Let's just do it. And so there's a lot of resistance to listening to the community because, quote unquote, they're not engineers. They don't know how water flows. How different is it today in terms of these agencies, not only water agencies, but others, in terms of responding to community groups like Irma's?
Well, I think that just dealing with the public agencies, let me put on several hats. If I'm a water district manager and I'm listening to Andy, or I'm a DWP, and I'm looking at losing all of these water sales, I'm having to think about how I'm going to meet the fixed costs of maintaining the infrastructure.
So in other words, you borrowed a lot of money and you have to pay for that mortgage.
That's right. And not only that, not only do I have to maintain the treatment plants and the pipes and all of that, I also have to give you an incentive to conserve water or to conserve energy. So now I'm losing at both ends. Number one, I'm paying you an incentive, and DWP and MWD do a lot of that. And on the other hand, I'm losing a sale. So
this is not the private sector.
This is not the and part of the economic drivers that Andy and I are talking about have to do with this reality, because you're not getting the economies of scale. For example, in the city of Los Angeles, this is incredible. The Bureau of Sanitation sits on land in Kern County, where they have millions of dollars in water rights. If the Bureau of Sanitation were to sell those water rights, could they invest that money in more water recycling and so forth? Under the current charter, you can't. Right now, all that money goes to DWP, simply because of the way it's lined up. So the economics don't fundamentally make sense. Another area where they don't make sense is where they merge with consumer interests. For example, we can talk about environmental ethics until we're blue in the face, and I happen to disagree. I believe there's a lot of environmental education that goes on in Southern California. I ran one of the largest environmental education programs in the region, larger than most metropolitan areas in the United States. But I can tell you that ultimately consumers are going to be driven by their best interests. Example, we talk about solar power. You know, the city of Los Angeles is trying very hard to finance a solar power program to meet their goals. But let's look at what's happening right now. There's resistance to the types of rate increases that must happen if we're going to be able to make that conversion. And why? Because there's this distorted thinking that we can get power cheaper, or that the status quo is okay. My final point is...
Wait a minute, you're in favor of rate increases?
I think that in some cases where you have to have the real costs of getting...
In other words, charge people for what they're getting. Because government oftentimes, like when we pick up trash, we never charge them.
You have to find mechanisms so that the real cost of delivering that good is reflected somewhere. So if it means that we have to give a lifeline rate to people with low income, we have to do it. But on the other hand, we can't ignore that full cost when we're making promises as government, I'm putting on my other hat, that we're going to deliver something to you.
Well, Jan Perry just voted against rate increases.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. it's a complex situation because I guess if you had to narrow it down to one word, it's lack of trust. Lack of trust in the Department of Water and Power.
The bureaucrats.
Well, I don't even like to say there's nothing wrong with being a bureaucrat or a technocrat or a public servant or even an elected official. But what is lacking here, and it's transparency and full disclosure and an obligation to the ratepayers to educate them and to outreach to them so that they know their public dollars, their tax dollars are being spent the way that they want them to be spent. I don't think that there's a lot of resistance to going towards renewable energy. I don't even think there's a lot of resistance towards creating the solar array project. There may be some resistance going through the areas that we may have to go through to create the delivery system to bring the energy down here. But what I do think there is a resistance and oh, sorry, mic closer, thank you. All right.
Trying to be subtle.
I just said, who's mic closer? You know,
It's just that we're recording. I think the
I'm
students
sorry.
didn't hear you, that's
I'm
not
sorry.
the problem.
I'm sorry.
But
Okay.
then I'm gonna ask them on the final exam what Jan Perry
They
says. So
won't
when
be
they
able
listen
to
to it,
hear
they
it.
won't be able, and they'll
That's right.
complain, and they
You're
say
right.
it's her fault that they gotta see
Okay,
it,
that's fine.
et cetera.
Got it. So, yeah, okay. So my point is that you're not going to find people saying, oh, I don't want, to move into the future, or I don't want to save money in the long run. I hate solar energy or wind energy. I don't even think people are even at that point. I think they're kind of open to it, actually. But what they're angry about is the lack of transparency in how much it actually costs, particularly when you have an agency that is highly liquid, that has an incredible reserve, that has base rate increases that they've already received. In addition to that, money that they've received to restore our aged infrastructure, and the ratepayer has not yet received an answer as to how much is restored, how many transformers were fixed. We just got an answer a couple days ago about why the pipes may have exploded in Studio City. And again, it's an aged infrastructure issue, money that they have already gotten and don't understand. The ratepayer doesn't understand, like, why is this still happening? So it's transparency, it's disclosure, it's not opposite, it's not resistance to the future. But what we have here in Los Angeles is these polarized politics where, if people don't get their way out of the gate, they say, well, you're against me. And in fact, what it is
You're all Democrats. You're all liberal
no,
Democrats.
it's a nonpartisan. These are at the local level, we're nonpartisan, so it doesn't matter whether a Democrat or Republican. These are nonpartisan offices, unlike the state or the federal
Yeah,
government.
but what I mean by that for the students is that you're ideologically, most of you are, if you were to run for partisan office, and I think there's 5 former state legislators on your council, we're Democrats, and you ideologically think the same way, basically, about the role of government and how it should be used. But explain to the
I
students.
wouldn't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
Let me pick it up because I'm an environmentalist. I'm a progressive. I share the same concern about the lack of transparency that's creating distrust. And I'm backing green energy big time. I want to back up and translate with what Adan said about paying the real cost. Last week also we heard that it's costing $300 million a year in Medi-Cal payments for the people in our community who are suffering from disease, from air pollution. Now, we're paying. We're paying with our lives. We're paying with our quality of lives. The fact that 5,400 people in Southern California died last year from air pollution isn't a community conversation that we have, and it's not something our community is responding to. But we're paying straight out of the state budget for taking care of people who can't afford medical care, and we're causing the damage through how we generate electricity, how we generate diesel fuel in our cars, is causing the damage. We're paying, but we're not paying the cost at the pump. We're not paying it at the meter. And that's part of the disconnect.
People don't want to be charged that, though. I mean,
what's that?
People don't want to pay that.
Yeah, but we're forcing the people. This is what environmental justice is about. We're forcing people who don't have a voice, who can't afford to pay with their lives. mean, think of 5,400 people dying and how many families that's connected to. This isn't mythology, and I know it's really uncomfortable to talk about it because it's them. But, you know, we have to move that into embracing what public health is about, what the real cost is. I'm sure Adan.
But I think the whole transparency thing, you know, I was on the national board of the Audubon Society for several years.
What's the Audubon?
The Audubon Society is an organization. It's the oldest environmental organization in the United States. We protect birds, and we create nature centers around the United States. And I recall having these conversations with other members of the board. I was on what they called the Centers Review Task Force. We set up facilities like Debs Park at the Audubon Center. And the debate was, can we run these centers at a profit? And something happened here that I started to think about, and I think it had to do with Proposition 13 in California and the wave that it took in the United States.
This is the 6th or 7th panel that we had so far this semester, and this is the 6th or 7th time that Proposition 13 has been mentioned.
Because what it did is that it said to everybody, to government, to nonprofits, that everybody had to operate like a business. And we lost our vision of what government is for. Government is there to make investments that the public sector would never make for itself. For example, the private sector could never build the interstate highway system. The private sector could never build the transcontinental railroad. It just couldn't be justified within when you're going to get a return, you know, that you expect within 5 to 10 years. It just doesn't support that. But all of a sudden, you have nonprofits, you have government, and others that are acting like the private sector, like business. And when they make investments, and when we judge them, we ask them, is there going to be a return for that within 5 years? And the thing is that when we make investments in education, when we make investments for infrastructure, we're making those investments for the long term, for the next generation, not for ourselves. One example, it cost us something like, in today's dollars, $5 billion to build the current $15 billion to build the water system that we have today in California. We're asking the voters to renovate that system with $11 billion. I don't know, there's a lot of questions as to whether that bond is going to pass or not. But whether you agree with it or not, we're just not willing to make the investments in our public infrastructure, in our education for those long-term reviews.
So, quick caveat, I think the private sector is willing to make that investment if you give them a monopoly in terms of a region or a franchise.
The private sector, where I find the injustice, is that the private sector is expected to make those investments. They take the risk. When you look at nonprofits and when you look at government, they're not expected to take the risk, because when you build something and it doesn't turn out like you thought it would, what you wind up with is a deficit. What you wind up is conflict over jobs and a loss of reality. One example, we talk about green jobs, green jobs, green jobs. I was talking to the head of the Department of Water Resources. What could be more green than operating a treatment plant that secures that the water that you're going to consume is safe? I mean, that's a very human green job. And yet the state of California can't keep its operators. And within the next 5 years, there's going to be a crisis in the state of California State Water Project, because they don't have the operators to do the job. You go to investor-owned utilities in the private sector. They have to deliver water that is safe to drink. It takes a Class 5 operator to operate a system that makes the water safe for you to drink. If there's a Class 5 operator job position that goes up for notice, how many applicants do you think you'll get, even in this economy?
I have no idea.
Maybe 1 or 2.
There you go.
One or two.
There's some seniors here that graduate and need a job.
And you should be able to do that with a high school diploma, and yet people aren't applying because they don't have the qualifications. In the state of California, my wife is the Dean of Students at UC Riverside, and they did an interesting survey just about 2 years ago. You know, there's a lot of stereotyping about who's taking advantage of graduate programs in California, and we say, oh, the Asians are kind of taking over. They're taking up all the courses. Well, it may be the case, but U.S.-born Asians are having the same problems getting through graduate courses in the technical sciences as everybody else. So we can talk about green jobs until we're blue in the face, but we're really missing the basics, I think.
Jan, going back to the Department of Water and Power,
Yeah.
you had earlier mentioned that the city council's in charge of it, but yet you told it to give you $73 million, and they said no.
That's right.
And they have still not given you this
That's
$73
right.
million.
Yeah,
So
and
who's in charge?
Well, they are, well, some people feel they've gone rogue. And, you know, I'm not gonna, I don't feel.
Explain to the students that,
Well,
I know it's complicated, but the whole controversy we've been having for the last week and a
Yeah, I'll
half.
tell you. What they've asked for is an energy cost adjustment factor. This is basically a rate increase. This is separate and apart from the base rate increases that they received over the past few years, just to stay competitive with purchasing reliable and inexpensive energy on the open market. The plan for their ECAF right now does not.
ECAF again is
ECAF's
energy.
energy cost adjustment factor does not include easing our city off of reliance on coal over the next 5 years. So even though there's this chit-chat about green this and green that, they still want to keep using coal for the next 5 years. So what they want is this cost adjustment factor so that they can begin to dig even deeper into a renewable portfolio and become more expansive in their acquisition of contracts and projects and things like that. But what we've asked them to do, like the rest of the city, is to cut their operating costs. So that meant cut administrative, operational issues. Instead, they went and cut operating costs related to one of their more successful programs, which was energy efficiency and conservation, which is not what we wanted them to do. So that's one issue. And the other issue is the outstanding issue of what you call the power revenue transfer. Now, traditionally, the Department of Water and Power has transferred a certain amount of money to the city of Los Angeles. This is a proprietary department, like the airport, like the harbor, and so they're quasi-public-private in that they generate profit, and so they transfer some of that profit to the city of Los Angeles so we can balance our budget.
Because the
Now-
city owns it.
That's correct. And well, the ratepayers own it. But yeah, you're right, the city owns it. We own it. They have asked us to vote to increase rates so that they can charge the ratepayers more money with a concept of a, quote, lockbox to take 0.1% or more and set it aside just for renewables. Well, I felt, and a number of us felt, that this had not been presented to the ratepayers in a fully forthcoming and transparent manner on the record. And
Why didn't they do that? They're a public agency.
why didn't they do it? Because they didn't feel like they had to do it. I don't know why they didn't do it, but that doesn't matter so much. It was our responsibility to make them do it.
But
And so,
aside from this specific issue, because I do think there was some transparency problems in how it was presented, but going back to Adan's point that we typically don't pay what it costs, residents in the city of Los Angeles pay less for their water and their energy than it costs.
right.
I mean, so we,
And that is why we have a deficit. Yes, all right, he's right about that.
but we should increase rates.
No, wait, no, let me finish. You have to explain to people what the rates are. You have to explain to people that you're not easing off of coal because they've chosen not to, even though people have been led to believe that we are really moving forward on a green agenda. And we are, but we're still relying on coal for at least the next 5 years.
Explain to the students where we get the coal, that we own power plants.
Oh, we have power plants in, is it Utah, I believe, Four Corners. So these have been long-term contracts outside of the state of California. So
Wait,
the costs of energy are increasing, and that is true. And renewable energy, tends to be a bit more expensive than coal. Coal is cheap, dirty, reliable energy. And so people need to understand that. And yes, there will be a need for a rate increase if we continue to pursue this renewable energy agenda in earnest. But there are ways to do that which employ techniques such as staging in increases and very small increments. pushing them back a bit to see if economic indicators show that we are coming out of a recession. Of course, preserving protections for people who are at risk, people on fixed incomes, people who are disabled, senior citizens, lifeline customers, that sort of thing. You always have to carve out for people who are in that category. But those things haven't been done. Why they haven't been done, I think the department knows that it's a powerful department, and again, they're highly liquid. They have something called a debt reduction trust fund that has a balance in it of $547 million. And when they refused to do the transfer, I suggested with our chief legislative analyst and our own team of negotiators that we take the money from there instead, and either that or they use that to reduce some of their debt. So they wouldn't need an ECAF or an energy cost adjustment factor. Now, to date, they refuse. Now, you mentioned that we have 5 former state legislators. I want to say something about that. You see, we have term limits now, and it's really, really unfortunate because you get people just basically popping out of their jobs and popping into the next job. And when you have this collision of 2 different political styles, Sacramento, partisan, they're accustomed to working with the speaker directs the traffic because the speaker holds the purse strings to, the funding of campaigns, and the speaker issues a directive, and your party members follow that directive. Now, what I see is something that's very unfortunate that's occurring here in Los Angeles now, where you have a mix of people who've, come from different disciplines, come up through the ranks of the city, and now we have a lot of people on there from Sacramento. And Sacramento, because of the nature of its partisanship, would encourage more trading, negotiating, and it's more of an internal exercise as opposed to an external exercise. So, you can almost tell the difference when you see these public debates about who came up through the city and hasn't come from Sacramento due to term limits. And so we had the other day where 8 people made a motion to, affirm what we already did with the Department of Water and Power. And I'm going to tell you this, and you look at the papers tomorrow. The commission, for whatever goodness, is now meeting tonight, and they're going to take a motion. I voted against this motion to reaffirm what we already did. But
you had voted for it to begin with?
I did vote for it the first time, and the Department of Water and Power Commission rejected it. And that was the end of that, because I was willing to give it a try, and they rejected it because it wasn't high enough. I supported 0.5 of a cent per kilowatt hour with 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour for renewable, and the commission rejected that because they wanted to make it up, I think it was up to 8 cents at the time. So 8 members of the council yesterday, and many of them were former state legislators, sent a reaffirmation of what we did back before to the commission tonight. Now, what I would suggest that the students watch for is take a look and see what the commissioners do, because they will probably accept this reaffirmation, which did not need to be done, but they're going to add some things into it that I'm sure those 8 people who signed onto that motion and sent it back to commission will not expect, and will probably be very surprised. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't do what's called a Prop 245 and stop it again and then send it back again, because I hope they don't add certain things in there tonight.
Like, what do you think they're going to add?
They're going to probably add some amendments in there that will create a pathway to increase the rates without being very forthcoming.
Okay. This is complicated. Okay. I mean, I study this stuff. I follow it. I think the council member did a very good job. I'm going to try to restate it and fail. Then I'm going to turn to Irma and see if she can do it. Okay. There is a independent commission that the mayor appoints, and they want to raise the rates so that we can buy renewable energy and sell off our coal plant that we own in Utah.
That's not the plan.
Your turn, Irma.
I think they want to.
And then Adan's going to go. And
okay. I think what they want is to invest in other alternatives so they can get away from dependence on coal.
I said that.
And that.
Is she wrong too? Hi, this
But
is,
that's not in the 5-year plan.
that's going to say, that's bias grading. You prefer women's answers to men.
No, she was better, you're right. No,
Thank you, Councilwoman.
you're right, you're welcome.
But I think that's the core of the issue, because I happened to be at city council chambers when the conversations and the discussions were taking place, and there is a lot of political posturing. And a lot of it, I was observing,
But what's the issue? What is the issue?
what I think.
Yeah, I mean, what Councilwoman's talking about voting for this and voting against it, and the commission's not doing what she wants, and, I mean, I'm not even clear what she wants. And we'll,
I can tell you.
okay. We're gonna get to it. Let's,
I think it's the struggle for power. Is it because DWP has been very imposing, they're the ones who seem to be wanting to direct traffic and have been.
but the charter says they're supposed to be
I know,
independent.
but, yeah, but, what the charter says is one thing, but what they have done is another. And I think they slowly but surely have been getting away with it, if that's the word you want, and they have been taking liberties, and now they really did it to so many liberties that it's caused the council to say, okay, wait a second, you've just gone too far. And I think that is what's happened, and I do believe that there's been a lack of transparency, but I think that if you look at DWP, they're like this monster agency that no one's really held accountable and,
Yeah, because they're not elected. She's elected, but, yeah.
Well, Fernando, let me defend DWP. First of all,
Don't defend it. It's like-
DWP for 100 years has brought great prosperity to the city. Whether you agree with the methods that they did that with or not, what we have in Los Angeles today is attributable to some very talented people, both on the upper management ranks, starting with William Mulholland and others, down to some of the people that work there today. You can walk the hallways of DWP and most of the water agencies in this region, and square foot per square foot, you won't find a smarter group of public servants that know their stuff. And one of the disparities here is that they know their stuff. They know what it takes to bring water into this region. What has happened, though, in time is that you have other people that know their stuff, and you have a dual system that has evolved. And I know that when I speak to the few council people I talk to, they're living in two worlds. So you're talking about this DWP budget, their ability to give money to the city, their rates. Well, DWP workers earn by orders of magnitude way more than most city workers. So when you're a council person and you're paying, 20% less to an engineer at the Bureau of Sanitation than you are at DWP, you have to ask why that disparity exists.
Because DWP makes money.
Because they make money and because they've been allowed under their separate charter to evolve a whole different set of union contracts and so forth, because they have money. But from a fiduciary responsibility, since the city owns DWP, the council people have a very difficult task of reconciling for the public what that means. So here I am, reading the newspaper, and I'm reading that DWP workers earn 20% more than an engineer at the Bureau of Sanitation or in the Bureau of Engineering. Now, if it's any other product, what you have is a choice. You can say, well, I'm going to go buy an Apple computer at the Apple store for $999, or I'm going to buy it on campus for $899 because I get a student discount. You have a choice. What's happening with the city and these dynamics is that you really don't have a choice. And the people that have to interpret that choice are people like Councilwoman Perry. And so the position that they're in is extremely difficult because of the mixed signals that are not based, once again, on the true cost of providing a service. Because it's very difficult to know what that true cost is.
Everybody's for the environment. Okay, there's a consensus, yet we struggle to get there for all the two different power structures that we have. And it's difficult for people to understand. I mean, it's even, you could see that the students are trying to grapple with how does this all make sense?
Fernando, I don't think it's difficult for people to understand that it doesn't make sense. What's difficult to do is to persuade people to buy something that doesn't make sense.
That's right.
And that's where the difficulty is. If you go to a consumer and you provide them value, they're going to buy it. But if the value isn't clear, they're going to hesitate. And that's what's happening.
That's how you
Go
get
ahead,
back to
Councilman.
what Andy talked about, this house with the cistern and the subterranean. You
Mike,
go on the
closer.
street, you can see the house a mile away, sorry. You go on the street, you can see the house a mile away because it looks like a tropical wonderland compared to every other house on the street. And the family who lives in that house, they're saving money over the long term. Or the solar panels at 43rd and Central. Now in about 6 months, I'll be able to use that as a teaching tool with the roof garden to show people, look, you know, this is how much our utilities cost as compared to a building similarly situated with the same square footage, so that we're saving money on this, and we're going to be able to show that and demonstrate it. That's how you build consensus. That's how you build transparency, not by sneaking through rate increases and then telling everybody it's going to be good for you, although you don't really realize that yet. And then, you know, you build trust again. You know, when we were testifying up at the commission, we had our own consultants because we could not rely on the Department of Water and Power to give us the information about what was the minimal rate increase that they needed to be able to remain solvent and to maintain their bond rating. And the consultants told us it was 0.5 of a cent per kilowatt. You know, we said it was on the public record. Everybody was able to hear that. And then when we had a staff report from the commission, they said something that was so opposite that on the break I went to the staff person and I said, now, you know you weren't telling the truth. And the person said to me, well, yeah, I know. And I said, well, why'd you do that? He said, well, I had to. And I said, okay, well, now I've got to go back and rebut that. Because, you know, we can't just let that stand. But I say that to say, if I get treated that way, what do you think's going to happen to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why
we're talking about the power revenue transfer. We said that the Department of Water and Power is a proprietary department, as is LAX and the harbor. Yet LAX and the harbor don't have power or revenue transfers, do they?
No, but they help us in other ways. The proprietary departments assist us with transfers in other ways. For example, some of the departments have absorbed some of the employees that have been laid off and taken them off of the general fund and reduced our operating costs and absorbed not only their salary, but their pension and medical benefits too.
And the Department of Water and Power says they took 1,400.
Oh, well, they stopped. Here's the funny thing. This is hilarious. So they said that they were going to absorb over 1,000 of our general fund employees, and then because we didn't give them their rate increase, it's like they're having a global hissy fit tantrum. The interim general manager sent out a letter the other day that said that they were stopping all job transfers, stopping, rescinding all pending job offers, and basically they stopped it, and so they're not absorbing anybody.
So who's in charge? I mean, you keep telling them to do something and they don't do it.
Well,
Sounds like a bunch of professors, because
ultimately, I believe that the ratepayers will be in charge because we put a number of initiatives that will go on the ballot this November, and I can guarantee you that changing the governance of the Department of Water and Power, given the way that they have acted with such disregard to the ratepayer, this will be a slam dunk. These initiatives will, I'm sure, pass with flying colors. We won't even have to campaign.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and I also want Andy to.
That could be a huge mistake.
Yeah, I'm going to want Andy to respond to this whole debate as well, and then I'm going to get some students to ask some questions up here. You mentioned $547 million trust fund. What is that?
It's the Debt Reduction Trust Fund. And it is their reserve that they keep in the event that you need a reserve not only to maintain a high bond rating, you need a reserve in the event of some extraordinary occurrence, you need a reserve if you need to back up fluctuations in the market and it increases your operating expenses. The reserve is
That's within the bond, so in other words, when they sold bonds, they promised to the.
Maintain a reserve at a certain level.
But they promised to the bondholders, those that bought them, that they would maintain this reserve.
Correct.
And so by law, they have to maintain it.
Yeah.
So it would be very difficult for the city to take that.
Well, yeah, that's true, but in looking at the language, because we did examine the language, there are not the restrictions on it that you would believe. Actually, we probably could find a legal way to be able to do that, but what would make more sense to them and to the ratepayer is to reduce their own debt load by going into their own reserve and reduce the amount that they need to seek for an energy cost adjustment factor.
Okay. Andy, Adan, and Irma, I'm going to get rid of the commission, the mayor, and the council, and I'm going to make you in charge of the DWP, because in a class we can deal with theory, okay? So Andy, you are in charge of the Department of Water and Power and all the resources and everything that it does. You don't have to worry about Jan Perry or the commission or the mayor. It's become a dictatorship, and you are the benevolent dictator, okay? What would you do besides plant a bunch of trees? What else would you do?
I think that's where we start. As a team, kumbaya moment. Actually, 2 points. One is, even though the Department of Water and Power is an agency, independent agency of the city of LA, it actually operates like a business that requires bonds that they have to sell. They have to go to big people and say, we're good for our money, and they have to sell that. And the interest rate that people who buy the bonds is affected by how much trust the buyer has. And this battle that has been happening, and the fact that the city council is threatening to actually disband the board and take over running the Department of Water and Power is making the bond people crazy, and they just raise the rates.
So what Jan is doing is causing more money?
Well, no,
But we
no,
haven't-
no.
wait,
No,
correction,
she's being
correction.
responsible.
No, we haven't threatened to disband the board.
Well, no, but
No.
what's on the ballot?
Well, it's the way the board is appointed, to be able to give more opportunity for more appointing from the mayor, the council, and from the Congress of Neighborhood Councils. So it would expand the way members are appointed to the board, not to disband the board.
Yeah.
And the ratepayer advocate, too.
And we totally agree about the need for transparency. So that aside, the faster, sort of more complex answer to your question is we do have to restructure. We have to restructure big time to stop the hemorrhage of cash from not connecting the dots. And this is going to sound, let me tell you what the restructure is.
Money.
What's that?
The DWP makes a lot of money,
Right. And it should.
right?
It needs to survive and to invest in state-of-the-art equipment, all the green energy that we want and all of that. I'm not talking about that at all.
It makes even more that it can give the city of LA $200 million a year or more.
So I have to answer a question that you asked before, which is why DWP? I had a meeting yesterday with the city's chief auditor, and that's Wendy Rule. And the controller, sorry. And she was explaining to a group of leaders downtown that the reason why DWP pays this money, where the other agencies don't, is it's making money. And it has property all over town. Every place where there's power lines and offices, they don't pay any tax. And so they don't pay any property tax because it's owned by the city. And so they worked out this deal many years ago that in lieu of property tax, they would pay their share back to the city. So it's not like the city's robbing it from DWP.
Well, the MTA doesn't pay property tax, the school district doesn't
They
pay
don't make
property
money.
tax.
They're
Well,
not rich. They're
good
not
point.
making money. So that's where that comes from. But the question is, how would I, if I was the benevolent dictator, I would use a building, a very special building. This is going to sound like science fiction, but it's actually real. The city just built a new one called an Emergency Command Center. Just spent $160 million to build a facility, a place where they gather some of the smartest minds in the city. Heads of each agency, a senior person from every single agency in town. And they gather them together to solve problems, specifically to protect human health and safety.
And during a crisis.
And whenever people's lives are threatened in this town, when more than 10, like when there's an earthquake or whatever, they pull this crack agency together and they have access to thousands of heavily armed people, an air force, paramedics, they can call the governor, they can call the president and get whatever they need whenever there's a major threat. But their job, and they're highly trained to actually collaborate, to connect the dots, to look at the big picture instead of being stuck in, and that's why they assemble in this room with really high quality data feeds of what's going on the street. The challenge is that room sits empty almost all the time.
Because it could only be called during a crisis.
Well, we're in a crisis, but we're not recognizing that we're in a crisis. And that's the kind of leadership that I'm talking about. And believe me, I'm not running for office. I would never accept the job. But I've worked in the Emergency Command Center. TreePeople has led disaster relief activities for the city when we've pulled together thousands of volunteers from all over LA to help
So
save
you would use this
homes and
command
lives.
center.
I would use that approach, the same training, and move out of this thing that only happens when a life is threatened from a quake or they turn it on during the riots, and move it to recognizing that we're in pain now, that we have problems now, and that if we sit and use the state-of-the-art facilitation and hold ourselves accountable and have it transparent, that we can bring in these data streams and work as a whole team. The technology's there, the human management technology's there, we're not using it. It comes back to the transparency, it comes back to moving into the 21st century, and that's where it comes to you.
Adan?
Because you guys, I mean, I don't know, how many of you are tweeting right now? I mean, the fact that you can multitask.
Who raised their hand?
I'm not busting you. I'm not busting you. But the fact that you can multitask, you can multitask better than any of us up here. And that's the new generation, and we need to be able to do that.
Adan, you're Mulholland. Go
Well,
ahead.
Fernando, you can read what I would do in an article that my colleague at Rose and Kindle, Michael Gagan, and I published in Urban Coast, which is a journal of Loyola University that Dr. Shelley Luce publishes, and it's titled "The Water We Drink and the Water We Don't." And it basically just
happened to have it right
it gives you the history. It gives you the history of how we got all messed up, and then it also proposes a solution. The solution that we propose is that we basically need to manage water on a watershed basis, so that we're accounting for all.
Explain what a watershed is.
A watershed is basically all the area around a river that drains into that river.
It's like a district.
It's a natural feature.
Consider it a
Of
catchment.
the land. It's a catchment. So, for example, the LA River, we put a lot of concrete over it. We don't capture all the water that we possibly can because it was mainly meant for flood control purposes. There was an Olmsted plan that was made back in the 1930s, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce, that basically gave us a solution.
So you would reorganize by watershed districts in
I
terms
would-
of water, which would cut across county and city and
That's
all
correct.
and communities.
I would realign DWP to be a major force within that watershed authority, so that it would basically be in a position to leverage the economics not only of providing a water supply to the public, but would also have to account for the cost of treating that water and hopefully recapturing that water for the public benefit. The second area that I believe deeply in is that the city of Los Angeles ought to be to the issue of global warming and carbon accounting that California is to the United States. And one of the problems that the city of Los Angeles hasn't thoroughly grappled with is how does it position itself that way? Well, number one, it has to start tracking its carbon emissions and the ability to reduce those emissions and earn credits and monetize those credits. There's no entity better positioned to do that. There's two entities in LA that can do it. Number one is LADWP, and the other one is the Bureau of Sanitation, which is already doing it. And so for the future, it would mean that we would be able to drive revenue from the whole issue of carbon trading.
Irma, you are now the dictator.
Well, what I would do is, first of all, I think it was very clear today that this is a very complex issue, and I think a lot of the issues that the City Council are dealing with are complex. So the first thing I would do is I would bring a team of experts in different areas. And I'd go to the academic institutions because there's so many wonderful ones in Los Angeles. I'd bring in the financial community,
Thank you.
the business community. We'll make sure we include you in the group. Because
I thought that was obvious.
Oh, okay. But I really think that sometimes, instead of, I don't want to call them consultants because I don't like the notion of consultants, although I've been one myself. But I think that we need to have an ongoing group of individuals who are planning strategically and thoughtfully on what's going on. The second thing I would do is I would look at other cities that seem to be more advanced in the way they handle these issues. So I think that why reinvent the wheel? Look at other success stories to review that. And I think that I would take DWP away, as you said, from the city and make it its own separate entity. I don't think that
An elected board or an appointed board?
I think elected because they can be held accountable much more than an appointed board. But, you know, the problem with elected, sometimes they doesn't mean that they have the resources and skills to do the job. And
it takes time, and as Jan Perry talks about term limits, they don't have time.
because, you know, the Board of Commissioners are not a paid position. It's a volunteer position, and I can't imagine all that they have to read and all for the decisions they have to make. Are they fully prepared for that? You know, but I do think that as the students who are going to be future ratepayers, if they're not already, that it's incumbent upon them to really take, as I say, ownership and leadership, and start asking these questions. You know, when you have a candidate, they're ready for city council, that you ask them, what about? Because sometimes you don't ask the kinds of questions to candidates that we should ask, because either we're shy or embarrassed, or we just don't know what the question is. And the scary thing about this whole conversation is we don't know what we don't know. You know, I never thought that I would hear that we would be getting another rate increase. I've heard the rate increase for DWP so much in the last couple of years, it frightens me. And I'd like to know specifically how many rate increases we've had. I do believe that we need rate increases to make it work, for it to be functional. I think that's important. But from what I've heard today, we're not being charged that, so that it's being paid for its services that it's rendering.
Right. They are ratepayers. They pay tuition, and we use part of that tuition to pay our electricity, et cetera. Loyola Marymount University, every single drop of water that we use to irrigate is reusable, is from the West Basin plant. We don't use new water for all of our plants and irrigation. Also, we happen to have the largest solar panels of any university in America, right above this building here. So we're trying to do our job. Roberto.
How can you sell rate increases when there's so much money already being used irresponsibly out there, and it should pay for itself?
Yeah, what I'm arguing.
Let me get Adan and then Councilmember Perry. And then
What I'm arguing is not that, I believe you're going to pay anyway. Let me give you an example. Right now throughout Southern California, if you're a builder and you want to build a new housing development, and you want to annex into a water system, like the city of LA or others, those water entities are expecting you to bring your own water. And you're going to pay, as a consumer who buys that house, the real price of water. So within a short number of years, you're going to have this disparity between people that are paying the full cost of water and those that are not.
even within the city of LA. I mean, you're already
Perhaps
seeing that in the region.
in the city of LA, you may see that there's an opportunity to blend that rate because you've got groundwater, but like, for example, in the Inland Empire and in other areas, it's going to be very, very readily apparent. And so when that happens, we're going to have to make decisions. And those decisions are going to have to be made based upon real economics. So that when the councilwoman is having to make a decision, she's not looking just at the economics of bringing water into the region and the full cost, but she's also going to have to look at the cost of treating that water so that it doesn't violate the Clean Water Act when she discharges that. And then she's going to have to talk to you and say, you know what the real cost of water is? It's right here. It's in these two parts. And you're already paying it. And we're not maximizing even what you're paying, because chances are that if you built efficiencies into the system, overall, you might wind up even paying a little less. But you're not going to see it. It's a matter of, I think you're right, selling it, but you're going to have to sell it honestly.
Yeah, sell it honestly. We have to be able to explain to the ratepayer, yeah, we've been energy efficient, and these are the programs that we've rolled out to you, and this is how it's translated into savings to you on your bi-monthly bill, and we have done a good job of helping you conserve water. The other day when we had a presentation from the Viterbi School of Engineering on the blowouts of the pipes because of the aged infrastructure, they made a very simple suggestion which might enable us to avoid having another summer like we had last year, which is to stagger the way we ask people to water and do the odd number of addresses one day and the evens the next, because we can't necessarily replace the pipes as fast as they need to be replaced, or the lining that goes around the pipes. Although we need to be able to show the ratepayers, this is what we've done in your community in terms of pipe replacement, renovation, or enhancement, and this is what remains to be done. So this is how the money has been spent so far in your neighborhood, so that you can have an expectation that, you know, your street won't subside because the pipes, or you won't have power surges because there are too many people living in an area where there hasn't been an update on the transformer system to be able to bear the load. We have 10 million people in the county of Los Angeles, and a little less than half of that live in the city of Los Angeles. So, you know, we have a large population that we need to serve, but we still need to be honest and disclose how we're spending their money.
Councilmember Perry, Mr. Andy Lipkis, Adan Ortega, Irma Muñoz, thank you very much for coming.